Hello, welcome to our final edition of Meditations on the Tarot. We are discussing the world this evening and concluding the book. Let's go into overall impressions of the chapter and before we get into the details. Overall, I enjoyed the chapter. I felt like I learned a lot actually, or it just shed light into a topic that I've never seen discussed in a way that it was in this book, which I was really excited about. Again, I didn't agree with everything, but I think the concepts and the ideas were really there. And it didn't feel too long. For some reason, I have like a phobia of finishing books, but I've kind of been able to get over that with book club. So I did stall in reading it, but I did read the whole thing. So I'm proud of myself for that. But it didn't feel like a particularly long chapter, and it felt like there were enough topics throughout that it blended and moved on to the next, which was really nice. And I feel like he did a good job of bringing in all of the ideas from the book without feeling like a concluding chapter or like he was just summarizing the prior chapters. But I think it had elements of everything in there because of the inherent nature of the card. Cody, how was your impression of the chapter?
Yeah. Wait, the phobia of finishing books. Is that like I got this picture of like not wanting to leave the relationship, like that's how I feel about it. It's like if I finish it, then I won't be relating to the book anymore.
Yeah, I think too it goes into I'd rather make up an ending than I would actually find out how it ends. Like it's better in my head, or if it ends, then there's like but again, I think I grew out of this, but there was like disappointment in the reality of how it was written. And like it was just better to, especially with a lot of fiction books that I read.
Yeah.
Like I'd rather just make up an ending than hear how you're ending it.
There's actually a study on that I read about that was like people's satisfaction with like a TV series when they don't finish it versus when they finish it. And like people are more satisfied and they actually like I think measured like how much people liked the show, and people liked the show more when they didn't finish it than when they finished it.
That's so
Yeah, anyway.
interesting.
Yeah.
That makes sense because there's nothing to criticize. Like Game of
Yeah.
Thrones would have been criticized either way.
Hmm.
That ending sucked though.
I mean, yeah, but like no
Get
offense, but like a
started.
lot of that show sucked and no one gave that fucking any thought. They just were mad that the end sucked. But I was like, it's been this way this whole time. Like this end is very indicative of the entire story. Like
Oh,
Yeah,
you're a
if it
hater.
I,
didn't end
I
like
I
that, I
agree.
would have been
Yeah, I agree. That's a
so
good assessment. I like that.
I'm
Um,
like super hard on things.
but anyway, speaking of endings, this was a good ending. Like I liked this summing it up. Like summing up kind of all of them, or like the whole. It's kind of I felt like it really like pulled together the whole point of the great work.
Mhm.
And in so many ways. Like the world card is the revealing. It's like how do we deal with the world is like the central problem to the magician, or the essential thing. Like how are we dealing with the four elements, and the unfolding of the world around us. Like what's our relationship to that? That's like the fundamental thing, the root of why we even do seeking. So I thought it really did a good job in like giving that impression, um, and yeah, pulling it together. Good chapter. Yeah.
Agreed. Cool. Britannia, how was your overall impression?
Yeah, I finished the whole thing and it was an easy read. I think my opinion differs just a little because okay, I really liked the themes and I liked what he said in most regards, but there was like a lot of disagreements and a lot of narrow-mindedness. I felt like which is what I've had issues with the whole book, so I only assumed he would stamp it hard at the end. Um I did really like it, but I think I felt like he spent a lot of time displaying like the structures with the spheres and kind of like giving like these very cliche examples when I was hoping he'd go a little deeper in certain areas. Like I think he like skipped over like he spent a lot of time explaining that there was dangers, but he didn't necessarily like explain the way to like interact with them. He just like told you they were there. And I think that was like kind of lame. But I think that's his whole point is it's like up to you to figure out how to deal with it. And like that's like all part of like being a magician and all that stuff. But yeah, yeah. And there was just a few disagreements, like even what you said with like when he was comparing Eastern and Western Christianity and like the structure and the hierarchy and like which one's better. Like I think when he compares things that are like two sides of the same coin, he like does what Cody says he does, where he like divides things that are like I don't know. They're like they coexist and they're clearly like kind of contained within each other. So there wouldn't be one without another, you know, and they kind of have that way of balancing. So like how would you know what like divine wisdom is unless you encounter like this intellectual knowledge that's kind of a mirage, you know? Like there has to be you know, like a scale and a differentiation and stuff. And I like that part of what he brought up, but I think that like his certain biases too with like I mean, I don't know because I really do like the fourfold of like you know the elements and like the different like four associations. Um, but I feel like he always brings it back to like what he wants it to be, and that's like the highest elevation of that interpretation. And he kind of like belittles other interpretations instead of making them equally as valid. If not like yeah. So that was my only like criticism that's kind of like rang true throughout the whole book. But yeah, it was a good ending, good circling around.
Agreed. Super. Loved the quotes though in the beginning. I don't know why I really liked what he picked and just that he brought so in the first part because it was like Nietzsche, you know, the joy is deeper and I like that it was said there like when I read the quotes I was like these are pretty solid and then I was like really happy that he kind of expanded on some of those ideas moving forward. So like yeah, truly lives only when one dances. Like that's really cool. And just to even
Yeah.
put Nietzsche on the side.
Isadora and Isadora Duncan. That's like Isadora Duncan.
Who's that?
He's like, I think she's like the founder of modern dance.
Modern dance?
Yeah, no, she is. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, no, that's why I love that quote
yeah,
because it's
one
a
of the
dancer quote.
founders of modern dance. Yeah,
So
She
cool.
because it's even talking about like how like there is instead of like dancing for the sake of like dancing, there's like this deeper pull to like there's like a form of creation while like in engendering like emotion, but it's like a flow where like the emotion is bigger than you, it is the dance, and that you become that emotion, you like channel that emotion into the dance. Like
I
Pina
know.
Bausch
Like
is like one of those modern dance people too. Yeah. And they
you've
incorporate
seen like
elements in their dances. Sorry.
yeah, you've seen like the like Nataraj, the like the avatar of Shiva. That's like the dancer that dances the world into creation and destruction. You know. Yeah.
I feel like I know another strong adept, or you know, not strong, another very will like somebody else that's on the match say like similar magical path that I am as is like a ballet dancer. So I just think there's a lot like dancing and like music in general brings out these in such a like etheric way. Like I feel like that's yeah. And I was gonna save this quote for the end, but I might do it now just because whatever. So 626, the top. Um, yeah, if the last major arcanum of the tarot would suggest a conception of the world as rhythmic movement or dance of the female psyche, sustained by means of the orchestral accompaniment of the four primordial instincts, which gives the appearance of rainbow of colors and forms, or in other words, that the world is a work of art. Like
Yeah.
that's so beautiful.
Yeah, I'm
that
right
is a
on.
really beautiful one. And actually hearing that again after remembering the whole chapter, because that's towards the beginning. It's like, oh yeah, okay, that sets forth the whole chapter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah.
Well, and I love that it's like a creative work of art, you know?
Yeah, this whole divine creation thing, and like that rubbed me too. I think like this like dichotomy between the mirage and the divine. I actually think the mirage is divine also. Like, like I pretty fundamentally believe that. And so like setting it apart, but I get why he kind of sets that apart too. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself in the
No, let's get
chapter.
into it
Well,
because I
no,
feel like
no. Yeah, I
let's
kind
get
of
into
agree
it.
that like the mirage is actually like a three-dimensional physical thing that sets a shadow into like the like it
Investigating.
basically mirrors the divine, but like it becomes like physical. So it kind of strips of the divinity and only becomes like the shadow or the mirage, but it's like really actually tangible in like our reality, but really like in the bigger reality, like that's less tangible than the actual like divine version of that.
Yeah, I mean it's a passing illusion. I mean, like in Buddhist sense, it's like it's the material world is in flux. There's no solidity to it at all. So like it is a mirage in a pretty fundamental
Yeah, it's all a
sense.
mandala.
In thinking that sense, yeah. But it is kind of everything. It's like penetrated by divinity. It's like and yeah, like seeing it, I can see where like seeing it as a mirage is like can be helpful to like let it go a little bit. I think that's like really important to not be just like totally caught up in the mirage, that there's like the penetrating space of like the ether or whatever, like that, like fun, that the fifth unifying element, right? Is
Hmm.
like that inside the mirage. That's something that you're not normally conscious of, but like when you embrace, when you can like synthesize and bring it together with that, then you have like the full divinity, and like the mirage is in it, right? But it's like it's still interpenetrated. Otherwise, you can like just be like totally focused on the mirage where you're like, and you're kind of like separated, and you're kind of in a um in a kind of agitated or like not agitated isn't the right word, but it like pulls you into states of suffering.
Well,
I would say,
I mean, from personal experience, like I feel like I have had a lot of like visionary kind of experiences, both like using psychedelics and in my like sober states. And I feel like this shed light to differentiating experiences, which I think is important for somebody like me because I can get caught up in viewing the visions as absolute fact or speaking about them like I'm seeing the future or like there's something going on. Because then I start I have started to spiral into very crazy states and like really not trusted other people and like made rash decisions because of like something that I saw. Like, it does lead you into, so you have to have kind of like this practice of having a sobering mindset. But again, this is coming from a practice of obedience, chastity, and poverty. So like with those fundamentals, of course you can kind of see a lot of these things as mirages and not explore them deeper because they're not something that you need to for your practice because you're moving through that and above that. But like, I mean, for my practice, I have to embrace them and work with them because I don't necessarily follow those same principles the way that he talks about, even though I like them a lot, obedience, poverty, and chastity. But yeah, I mean, I think it is the opportunity for equally the opportunity for good shadow work, but also you got to watch yourself not getting too, cray cray or out in the astral where you think,
Hmm.
everything's happening exactly like you saw it because it's not. It's a image of, it's a part of the ether that's happening at that time and space of what you're thinking at that time. So refine your space and you'll probably have better visions. That's what I keep telling myself.
Well, it was talking about too, like the intention of joy versus truth, and that like some people don't want to see the truth, that they just want to see the joy, which is, like the mirage, or like sometimes could be like the physical and material things that they gain. Like in my podcast, they were talking about how like people that were like less happy at their job had like, like they were trying to convey that like material wealth and like having like status at a job doesn't actually mean happiness. and they did like a study, and it was like 75% of people like fell within that like description. And it was really interesting that basically like people that were more satisfied and happier long term with their lives, not even just their jobs, but their lives, were like doing something out of pure um like a driven but more towards the truth than it was like the joy of it. It was talking about that in the podcast, so it kind of like lined up with this chapter. But I really liked those two bumpers between like, are you doing this for like the right amount? Because like the joy does come from like the experience and the knowledge. It's weird because you're just like humbled and thankful that to like, oh, like, you know, I get to go do a new thing, or I get to learn a new thing, or have a new experience. Like it's just, it's a really cool, like very like pure moment, you know. And so I think that that's a really good aim here as like a way to react to a lot of the dangers that he was talking about. I think that was like the one thing that he did give you that I really liked here. Plus like the harmony thing. Because like joy is kind of like a lower frequency than harmony, but like joy is indicative of harmony he was talking about.
I really like, yeah, I mean the harmony thing is really resonant for me, like and as the dancer, um and dancing is like a big part of my, like, I consider myself a dancing magician, like in a sense. Like, no, it's like it's true. Like movement is so important, and internal movements, and like the imagination and imaginal movements and all this stuff is like dancing with this whatever the like spirits are, and it's like, and it's interesting because dancing with the spirits is like harmonizing with them in a way that you're not like, there's no agenda, which is really interesting. Like, you neither have like, you don't have an agenda with the spirit to like get you to do. It's just the in the moment being with that spirit, you know?
Yeah, and then like creativity comes out and you get to like
Yeah,
engage in like this higher level where you're like just like fully being in like the best
yeah.
way. Yes.
And that's like dancing with the illusion, dancing with the mirage. And it's like, there's no agenda to like transcend the mirage, you know, or like subdue the mirage. You're just in it, you're with it.
I feel like that's something I need to learn still. And I think yeah, I think everyone, but I know I mean, but yeah, mine have also been like extremely scary and like potentially like identity, like not like when I was doing not good things, it was like really telling me that I was not, not safe. Like you are not safe, like these people are trying
Right.
to hurt you. Like it was like I couldn't take that. Like
You were like, you had some like spirit like parasites, like, and like some bad relations with spirits. I think that's, to me, that's what that sounds like,
that's a good
Well, no, and like think
like
about it this way, like if you're
disharmony,
like,
in fact.
well, like think if like your angels are like being like, hey, like, you know, don't do that, don't do that. It doesn't have to necessarily be a bad thing. Maybe it was a good thing trying to tell you that there's bad things, but it seemed like a bad trip at that time because like you didn't want, that was like the worst possible thing you could hear, but it was coming from a benevolent place.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? So that wasn't necessarily negative or like horrible, and there wasn't like bad thing, you know, like it was like good things telling you in a way that felt bad at the time.
Get away, like scare her that
Yeah,
way.
yeah,
But
terrible, bad. Like
scary things can be danced with too. It's just, it can be hard because it's like you're immediately react against that, so there's automatically a disharmony, you know. So it's like, but how can you like turn that disharmony into dance? It reminds me of like jumping in a mosh pit right
Mhm.
now.
oh, I love that analogy.
Yeah.
Well,
Until
because
like
like
some
mosh
like
pits are like
really
violent but
hard,
peaceful too.
like just loud metal, that's like, that's
Yes.
scary and like, you know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that
I
music.
saw this really cool video. It's actually totally related, so I'm not going off on a tangent, I promise. I saw this really cool video from a metal concert, and it's like when the whole pit feels the riff, and then it showed everyone holding onto the fence and headbanging while holding onto the fence at the same time, and like all these security guards like bracing with their whole bodies as the crowd was like shaking this like wall all at the same time. But it was like thousands of people all like headbanging exactly in time with each other, and it was so cool. It was like the most peaceful like metal thing I've ever seen in my life. It was amazing. It was the
Yeah.
very pure harmony moment. So yeah,
Yeah,
bringing it
there's
back,
this,
harmony.
but yeah, that's the thing with like metal is like, is it, it's like, yeah, you can get into that
I
flow
love
with
metal.
it, you know? Oh yeah.
I just went to a metal show. Yeah, and
But
I
with
got
like
knocked in the
dark, with any kind of like dark music that like is kind of scary, you know, it kind of can teach you how to dance like
head.
with some scary shit, you know, scary spirits and stuff, I
Well, it
think.
tells you how to
I
like
mean, it's
drive on a
not
bumpy
everything, but
road.
it's it can be a cool lesson.
True. I am very grateful for these experiences because I can communicate with people who work with dark in a more visceral way, very effectively. And like I'm very middle path. So like I understand those sides and I want to, leave space for that in my practice while having a good balance of it. So yeah, I agree with that. Like I'm grateful for those experiences because not a lot of things scare me anymore.
Same. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but yeah, same.
Yeah.
There's a quote.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
No, I'm just yeah, I agree.
On 629, towards the end, I say sober meditation because since it is a matter of meditation on the world as a work of art instead of conceiving it as a system of laws, we do not in advance condemn ourselves to sterility by renouncing the elan of intoxication. Do we not in advance condemn ourselves to sterility by renouncing the elan of intoxication? Maybe I had a question about that.
Oh, well, that's a good one.
Well, sober is like the intoxication of the soul being like tempted or lured by the mirages in a way. It's like don't drink the Kool-Aid. Like that like quote is like great. Perfect.
Do we not condemn ourselves?
But
Okay, yeah, so it's just a work of art, then are you just an intoxication versus a system of laws instead of conceiving it as a system of laws? I think this was the lead into him talking about the false Holy Spirit. So
yeah, when he talks about like the joy and the truth there, and then he goes into the harmony of rhythms, and that suffering it like comes from disharmony, which I really liked and resonated with like that like physical, tangible way of like having an analogy that's also like a physical, like it's not just a simile, it's also like an analogy. I don't know, it's both. And then he ties it into gonna say well, and like I don't know, what did you guys think about like the whole like movement thing too, like with the dance being like the movement and like how he like incorporates like the wand and the what was the other hand?
Filter.
Yeah. So I like the representation of that like on the card, but also like in his like description.
where does he say a
It starts with like 6:30 and then 6:31.
oh,
Then he goes into like the psychic and mental rhythms.
oh. Yeah, joy is the harmony of rhythms while suffering is their disharmony.
Hmm.
I think you kind of said that.
Yeah. But then he goes on like in 6:32 how he talked about like you said like the joy is deeper than woes and that like even though like there is a disproportionate amount of like suffering that like it makes the joys that much more important even and like longer lasting and that they like resonate deeper and that they're the first thing that came like because before the fall there was just joy and then suffering came after.
Yeah, like again, I think that suffering's necessary for and like I mean should be like if we could have I mean yeah, I think if you
Do you
can
want to hear a biblical refute? I have like a biblical refute which is very like literal and like critical analysis like push my glasses up. Um, if there was no suffering, Adam wouldn't have asked for an Eve.
yeah.
Boom.
Did
Oh,
Drop
Adam
the mic.
ask for Eve?
He was like lonely, and so God made
Yeah.
Eve. So there was
Yeah.
suffering.
Yeah.
Ooh,
He
what
was, yeah,
now?
that's
Right?
the point.
So that's null and void. Like his argument just like it kicked the stick out from under it.
I don't know, you'd have to I mean I agree. I agree with how I've been taught because I was taught that Adam asked for God for Eve, but I don't know if that's actually like accurate according to like Like
the most
in some
reductive
sense,
version.
what?
I was
so
gonna
in
say the
some
most
sense,
Sorry, go Cody.
in some sense, that's the original sin, is Adam asking for Eve, or Adam suffering for asking for Eve at all.
Well, it came down to him being lonely, I think was the point, that he was
Yeah.
lonely. And so like, but loneliness is suffering
Yeah, and it's not like
at the
he's
very
not,
core of it.
and in this, and in like this context, he's not like, he wouldn't be lonely if he's like totally united with God,
I
right?
know, that's
With
what I'm saying. So there
divinity.
was suffering before. So that's
Yeah,
why I like kind of just like ruined his argument without even having to go too deep into it.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's all like, I mean, yeah, it's like, if you're taking that
I,
stuff super literally, that's why, again, it's like the suffering and joy, like to me in my practice, that doesn't have distinctions. Like, I'm not trying to go into an all joy state. I'm trying to like actualize how to like have an effective like world going on, and like what it means for my soul to go on an enlightenment journey, and like being in it is the part of that journey. Like, and I think that stuff like joy and suffering, like, yeah, I think these type of paradigms do put you into a box of intellectual like non-making sense, like in a logic, because I do agree with that, like if that's how they're interpreting it. But I would probably say that a lot of other types of maybe like Judaism or like different types don't think that like Eve came from Adam, like from the rib. Like, I think it's a little bit different, but maybe not. Maybe that's
Right.
just me not knowing. Like,
I think you're right. There might be different kind of interpretations. I'm sure people have interpreted that in many ways, like, and
well, they've talked.
translations and stuff. I'm not sure.
I took a literary analysis of religious text class, and we read like excerpts from the Bible, and this is like part of it. And they were talking about how like it like everything's a metaphor. So like the atom splitting in mitosis or meiosis is like how Eve came, and that was the alpha beta. Like, you know what I mean? Like
that's just a
where there was
part of it.
one, yeah, and that's how, you know what I mean?
And I think
In like
that's
a
more accurate for how hermeticists would interpret that. I mean,
That's
again,
what I imagine, organic chemistry and whatnot.
you're having like, I mean, in hermetic paths, like, yeah, you have like the holy guardian angels and daemons that are, putting things, and there's gonna be those type of like, there's other, I think the Hermes path has different types of like interpretations of this stuff that I think Protestant Christians aren't gonna like. It's gonna be like, no, that's blasphemy, like Adam came, Eve came from the rib of Adam because he asked. Like, no, come on, like, I don't think, I mean, not no, but you know what I
Yeah,
mean.
Well, it came out
but
of
I
his
mean,
longing also. It's not just his like the physical, like maybe like taking out of, but like the she her or like whatever entity that force came out of existence from a longing or a loneliness or that suffering. That's like what,
Well, I
well,
mean,
prompted
well,
that. I don't know.
that it points to the loneliness of God, like having a thought, somehow having a thought of otherness, right? And therefore the universe is created, right? Like this like thing that's like completely self-contained, God, divinity that has nothing, that's like doesn't have anything to come. It's a zero. It's like, the 0 point, the like
well, I mean, I think,
the and then like there's this like thought, and this is like actually I remember in my I think it was my Hindu tantra class or something, I forget, one of my Hinduism classes, but studying like this like non-dual Kashmiri Shaivism. um it's like a sect of Shaivism in Kashmir, um that like, and they have like a really intricate like uh creation story, starting from like God like having a like an impulse, and then like, they describe like every step of the way, like how like a unity like becomes multiplicity, like with like precise detail.
the
Yeah,
book I'm
this like
recommending
one particular philosophy.
is from that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Shivaic Tantrism of Kashmir.
Oh, wow.
That's wild.
Crazy. Yeah.
Oh, but we'll save that for
I I'm pretty sure that's what I'm talking about, but it's been a while, so it might
I
be
mean,
something else in there. But I'm pretty sure it was that sect that has that like really intricate philosophy. But that's kind of like you could like link that to that Adam being lonely. And, uh,
I mean, I mean, I'm more on I'm more under the mindset that creation is like an inevitable of like out of nothing always comes something. And like void space is important to occupy because from there comes everything. So I think that that's just like, and also Eve, if you're like from Kabbalistic thought or whatnot, and he even gets into this with the worlds, you know, or the planes, and what so Bina, I don't know when it comes up in kind of a while, but um yeah, at Zula, Bria, Yetzirah, and Asaya, it's always like male energy, female energy, male energy, female energy. So like and that's very true of also, you know, of all of those like four thing, you know, everything that's like the four. So the elements and there was one more.
I mean, that's a yin yang split,
Yeah.
right?
And so you
I
can't,
mean,
yeah,
it's the same. Yeah, yeah,
you can't separate. I mean, that's like part I mean, to have creation on this planet, at least in this reality, you know, there's like that dualism, like kind of, I guess, needs to occur in some regards. Not that there's like, I mean, we are experiencing separation from a place of unity, which is kind of a
yeah,
paradox, but
yeah.
for us to figure out, apparently.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, that's generally my view of things as well.
Uh,
Um,
But I mean, we can't say what caused the Big Bang, you know? It's like
I mean, Tantra, yeah, it'd be, yeah. I mean, it's good to like kind of, that's why I'm really grateful for, yeah, this book club exploring different practices, you know, different types of ways of thinking about that, because I think, you know, they tell similar stories throughout.
yeah, I mean, this kind of segues on a 638. What can we say? Mankind is a unity, and one person's experience is meant to help and serve others. One cannot dispense with the experience of others, i.e., the authority, if one wants to avoid the traps like set with the spiritual experience. So it's like they kind of have to learn from like all the like black mirrors around them, but also like just from like the movement of it, like engaging, like you were saying, like with the spheres, like in a way where like saying it's inevitable. Like he said it a few times in the chapter, it's inevitable to like not interact. I mean, you're gonna interact with the spheres at some point of mirage, and that you kind of have to like know how to navigate them and stuff and kind of like decipher for yourself like each time you come through them. But I think that I don't know, it's interesting because I feel like I don't know, like he kind of does try to split hairs in the sense that like I feel like there is like that inherent unity already, and that there's a false sense of separation, and that's the spheres of mirage.
And I really think that's the root of all evil. Like, is this false sense of like, yes, we are creators and we create in a manifest way like this, but that doesn't mean that you're separate or other than.
They're like the egregores, like they were talking about like feeding or like building the towers in a way too, where like you kind of interact with the spheres, and so you're like building towers or building more like calcified like vision.
For the spheres,
Like,
you mean?
yeah,
I mean,
like
that's,
the egregores, like you're giving energy to something that's kind of like a false idea, or like not like the purest of intention, like it's seeking the joy instead of the truth.
I mean, I think the spheres in and of themselves have a lot more. Like, I mean, that's what's that called? I mean, that's Kabbalistic thought, like in very, I think there's a lot more to like, I think he's making it seem that way because it's not necessary. Like, if you're talking about like Yetzirah and Etzereth and all of those or whatnot,
Yeah,
like, there's a
yeah,
lot
yeah,
more to
that's
that. Like, he really simplified it in a way that like, I wouldn't use this as an example for like to even call that building of tower, because there's like, that's like very like core hermetics. That's like really interesting to like investigate. And it more goes into like how you where thought it's like played like thought patterning and also like how you see visions, like everything would have, yeah, it would have like places in that, but it helps you to understand how to like work with it more.
Yeah, I mean, like I
Like
kind of that's
parts
where
of
I kind of
creation.
disagreed with him and like saying that he was like his where he like he was disagreeing with like or basically he was saying that Eastern and Christianity and Western Christianity differ in like the sense that the Western is better because it has like this hierarchy of like gatekeeping for lack of a better term. But I kind of disagreed with the hierarchy in general. And I kind of felt like, I don't know, maybe that was more of like, how does he know that that's not a tower?
Well, and it's like, what does he do? Does he define, what does he mean by Eastern Christianity? Like, I just don't
Somehow there's no
Orthodox.
hierarchy. Yeah.
Orthodox. Like, what is that? Is that like like Greek? I
Maybe
don't know what
Lutheran,
he's
Yeah.
like
talking about there.
No, no, no.
Greek Orthodox and stuff.
No. Eastern Orthodox is its whole separate thing from Catholicism. Like it was a
Oh,
split of like the early church into like basically two big forms, the Eastern Orthodox Church and which was like Greek is like the Bible in Greek. It's all the Greek like biblical
oh,
tradition, and then like the Western, like the Roman, basically like Holy Roman Empire, the creation of the Catholic Church.
I mean, yeah, I felt like I didn't know enough about that to have an opinion, but I agree that he like, I just didn't really understand what he was saying. So I was like, I don't
Yeah,
think,
that's what he's talking about, the split between Catholic and
I mean, it just reminded me
and
of
they're different.
talks about Buddhism, or even here, like going into, I mean, there were a few different times in the chapter where he went into things like that sounded really specific, but I was like, you actually don't, doesn't seem like you know what you're talking about here. Like you haven't practiced it this way, or you're not coming about it from a non-biased perspective. Like you're coming at it like trying to organize it into a way that like is wrong and like Christianity's right. Like that's, so I just like skim over the just
Yeah.
like skim over
Yeah.
it now because I'm like, whatever, you know.
Although I did like the backhand he gave to like religious artists that were doing it for like money and for like fame and stuff. And he was talking about how like that there's a difference between sacred art and, just art or whatever. I kind of
Yeah.
like that because he was even talking about like how like churches that commission people to paint and or like make art for them. If it's not like conveying the message in a deeper way, it's not the how, it's the why. Like if it doesn't like translate, then it's not sacred art in that sense. And I thought that that part was like I like that he was kind of like turning an eye to his own bias in that way and like actually shining a light on it and being like, oh no, there's like mirages here too. So like his self-awareness made me a little more confident in like reading with him on like certain concepts to be able, to get the deeper meaning.
Well, yeah, and he says that whole thing is prefaced with him talking about like you're sitting with whatever revelations you have through practice for a long time, years, says
Yeah,
years. I think I might even have that quote.
I
Yeah, the
highlighted that.
silence. I think it was on what
Um,
643 maybe.
oh yeah, the rule. I can't quote the page because I have different. But the rule of every serious esotericism should be to be silent, often for a length of years, concerning every new illumination or inspiration that he has, so as to give it the necessary time to mature, i.e., to acquire that certainty which results from its accordance with moral consciousness, moral logic, and the totality of spiritual and ordinary personal experience. And the quote goes on to like add more like qualifications for the verification of your truth. But like that's actually a really interesting. I like that because it's points out how hard it is to discern. Like this is
Hmm.
like this chapter is really about discernment, like really about like how and that like that really razor sharp um, um like faculty that needs to be honed and how like very few people have it for this very reason. But like but I think it's fine to like experiment and like you got to make your art, even if it's not holy, and it's all still part of the dance. But that's that's my perspective. But in this case, like, but it's still like, even in that, like, to discern what like moves you, or to discern how to like resonate, how to harmonize with whatever it is, that kind of discernment is really important, and it's really hard.
Yeah, like the tools of spiritual hygiene and like the purification, in the sense of like tying it back into like the sitting in the silence is like a way of like purifying and like having that spiritual hygiene in a lot of ways too. Because he basically says like to like zoom in on the thing, and then like you kind of clean it up in a way to like find the pearl, where like you have to kind of get rid of the mirages to get to like the truth of it, instead of like just like focusing on the joy of the experience.
Yeah. And remember, to be silent is the commandment in the riddle of the Sphinx, of the earth element, the bull part of the Sphinx, and the bull animal in the card, and
Hmm.
the earth. So it is the earth, it is the world. So like, to be silent is like kind of the grounding practice. And I think that's actually, like, to me, that speaks to like the grounding practice of any real good, like, solid spiritual tradition, has to have some sort of mindfulness training. Like, it has to. Like, that's like absolutely essential, because without that, there's no discernment at all. There's not even like the beginnings of discernment.
And I love the physical representations on the card, and like the way he like kind of drew the significance of like the cosmic instincts, like where you're saying with like, the
Cherubs.
presence of like,
Yeah. The cherubs,
yeah,
right? The
in
human
each,
eagle.
no, there's the angel, there's the bull, there's the lion, there's the eagle.
Yeah, so those are the cherubs of the elements and the cosmic. Those are the astrological cherubs. It's like an angelic thing that ties into the constellations that goes all the way.
Yeah, I know about the constellation. Yeah, but like, just like, I love the term cosmic instincts in that way, like in the way it's used here, because it's like almost like a key that fits in like in it, and you can like feel it unlocking a bunch of different levels of like understanding in that sense.
Yeah, it
Like, I don't know, I really like
transcends.
that.
It's like to will, to dare, to know, and to be silent. Which, yeah, transcends all. Like, I love that that's like, yeah, I mean, this
Hmm.
chapter did make me really proud to be like a magician, and also like understanding that, like, okay, I'm kind of getting like the tie here, like, and how it's all kind of weaves into that. So that felt really cool, because yeah, the elements to the cherubs, like, that's a whole journey.
Yeah, and it
Yeah,
folds and unfolds. I like that part of the chapter
yeah,
too. Like
that
the
movement of it.
1, 3, 4, and then the 4, 3, 1, the
Hmm.
analysis, and the was it analysis and synthesis, even, or analysis and, anyway,
Yeah, he
like
brought,
how
No,
it
no, I
goes
know what you're talking
both
about. Yeah,
ways. Yeah,
I want to
I really liked
find
that
that
part too.
though, because that was a really good part. He brought like
it's a little later.
impulsion, movement, formation, and form.
Hmm.
Yeah,
That's on page 648.
and how it corresponds with like the Sattvic, the Tamas, and the Rajas, and the Yod
Hmm.
He Vav He, and like
Hmm.
and then, so the four, you have the four, which is the tetragrammaton, right? And the four elements and the four movements of energy. And then you have the three, which is the movement between them. So it's like movement from earth to water, from water to air, to air to fire. And in the movements, and in the bot in those, that you have the tamas, which is like this, like earth, like stagnant, and like movement to the like more agitated, and then the sattvic, which is like the uh, open awareness.
I don't know that as much. That's cool.
So it's like, but then
Yeah.
anyway, like, all those are the correspondences of like the movements of from going from earth to heaven, and then heaven back to earth,
Yeah.
unfolding. And
Yeah, reading this part made me think of because we're trying to wrap up the elemental workings again and then move into planetary. And I was doing some research last night, and they talked a lot about Aether and about what did they call it? Because it was even brought up in this chapter, and I was so excited to read it about it. But yeah, I mean, when I read that part, it was like
The fifth essence or the fifth
the
element.
quintessence. Yeah, the quintessence was brought up in let me pull up actually who wrote about it because
It's on page 652, and it was Leipzig. Leipzig.
okay.
Leipzig is a place.
Oh, whatever. I don't
So,
know.
so yeah, no, the quintessence is Akashic or ether energy, but that comes into so for so Mark Stavish wrote an article. I went on the Hermetic Library and was just looking up like planetary stuff last night just to get in preparation for, figuring out how to do these rituals. And this chapter was really helpful in how to like organize that. And even what you're saying with like the three unfolding, like with planetary work for the lesser hexagram ritual, like it gets into all these specifics, and he talked about the quintessence, but I really like it paired with the movements of impulsion, movement, formation, and form with the elements. But I like the number 3 with that because it's a movement, because the lesser hexagram ritual has the elements on all 4. So even though it's planetary energy you're working with, it's just really solar energy being like going through this with each of the elements, So I want to spend time. I'm just trying to organize that now. I don't want to go into too much detail, I guess, but it's like my wheels are turning for, okay, do we do 3 months here, like 4 months? Like, how do we do that? So something to think about.
Yeah. Well, I like to bring you back to this quote, like divide your stone into 4 elements and rejoin them as one, and you will have the whole magisterium. I just love that because it's the movement and the process, and like the breaking down and the harmonizing and that process and experience that like tunes you. Like you're the one being tuned by the experiences, I really like that. It seems like we're taking the right approach to the moving forward in the magic too.
I think so too.
But yeah, the 4-3 the 1-3-4 4-3-1 was on page 2 or 652 as well.
652. Oh, nice. Yeah.
What did you guys think about his like assessment of like the minor
Arcanum.
minor cards? Yeah. It seems like he was like brushing them off, but also like he was like, oh, those are for you to like experience as like microcosms within the macro of the world. And like those are the spheres that you need to navigate, and like the fine tuning of the like mirages that or something like that. That was kind of more what I got from that.
Well, yeah, because they represent all the like the little forces within the world, like the little elemental forces, like smaller processes,
Yeah, I liked how he
within
like
the
represented the cup.
elements.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
cup or the swords, like they have different like modes,
yeah,
like different movements, different
yeah,
activities within the world. Yeah, I really liked that.
yeah, and like the numerology of it, the 1 through 10 of like the 1 representing like the unified element itself, and the 10 representing kind of the most like complexified aspect of the element in some sense.
Hmm.
And then you have like the king, the court cards, which represent like the elements in combination, right?
Well, in the
Like
worlds, the planes, what's it
yeah,
called?
well,
Um,
yeah,
Etzuleth, Bria, Yetzura, and Esira.
yeah. I've never really had the planes be kind of related with the elements.
Oh,
I don't think I've noticed that. Yeah,
that I was
that
taught.
I
those
like that.
planes specifically. Like,
I
but
was
there
taught
was some
there.
I had some confusion. Sometimes it felt like he was like the comparison of the sword and the air element um was sometimes different than the water element. It felt like they were switched somehow.
Hmm.
I don't
Remember?
quite understand. And this is something I get frustrated with like elemental stuff, is that you can attribute like almost anything to all the elements. I mean, like my partner is studying like Buddhist psychology, and so like she has like these Buddhist elements, and they're like a lot of the things that are represented by the water element are very fire in the Western tradition, like very much would be fire. So it's like, what do you do with that?
They're all kind of foils. Yeah.
Sometimes that kind of thing frustrates me.
They're all like foils or like kind of black mirrors of each other. So it's like I think it depends on what you identify with, because you could either see the cup or the water. You know, like are you the thing that feels empty that needs to be filled up, or are you like the liquid that's constantly flowing? Like, you know, I don't know. I feel like with the sword versus like, you know, like you can even see the sword in two different ways too, because it could be like you're piercing through, cutting through the mirages, or like, you know, you can see it as, what was the other interpretation of the sword? Um, oh my gosh, where was it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of what he says it is. It's like cutting, it's that process of cutting through the coins, right? Like
Yeah.
you pay the
Yeah, cutting
coins, you
through the coins, yeah.
sacrifice the coins, and then you're up to the next level of the,
Well, so what you were pointing to was
coins.
the comparison. So from page 653 to page 654, it seems a little contradictory because you go
Mhm.
earth, water, air, fire, and then you have, according to how the suit decks, the four suits, the pentacles, swords, cups, and wands, it goes, earth, air, water, fire. And remember, we talked about that when we went,
Yeah.
when we were trying to decide what order did the elements to do. And that's just if you're going Kabbalistic tree or more tarot, I guess, oriented with how you navigate the tree versus alchemical orientation for how the elements unfold throughout it. So, I mean, I
Right.
think that that's like, I mean, I always go back to practice, that's just where, like, how can I use this information? Because ultimately, I mean, I think it is just a spiraling like effect, and not even up, but just like out and around and through. So, like, I don't think it really matters necessarily what I think there's milestones for this type of practice that you reach, but I like the alchemical way better because that just like seems to fit in my life a little bit more than like following the tarot personally. Like, even though the tarot comes from Kabbalistic thought, like and it is backed by, and all of what we're doing is too. I like the idea of like, how is this transforming within my life though, and within my body, and how do I want to see it pull through? So I don't know that
Yeah,
those
I think
need to be this.
I I feel like the alchemical is more of a like a procedural, it's like process oriented, whereas like and I think they both get to process, but the tarot is more like like figuring things out by step kind of thing, and it's
Mhm.
not there's not a it's like the difference between calling the elements just like a fundamental element, like a material element in nature versus a process or a and I liked what he said in this, and I think you already commented on that, but like the element is a movement, not a thing, you know. That's a really important like and that's more the alchemical, I would say, than like the tarot. I feel like the tarot kind of breaks apart the elements as things. It intellectualizes
Mhm.
versus like the alchemical is more like the process. More like getting familiarity with the elements and how they feel in our bodies, And it's a dance thing again too. Like you feel it, you dance with your whole body. You don't dance with your head. Well, you do, but it's if you see it.
Yeah. Not if you're head banging.
Yeah. Yeah.
The head banging people. I brought in the head banging, Britannia. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Made a joke. Cool. I think we kind of went through everything, huh? I'm like, did we miss anything? He did bring in Native Americans. which I noted because I noticed last.
I didn't like that part
I
because
did not like that part
Yeah.
either.
Wait, yeah.
I got so
How does he
pissed when
bring
I
in?
like the
Did you
North
miss
American Red Indian, like, oh my
the
Oh
God,
yeah,
just
the
in the
yeah.
red
face.
What does
Indians?
he
Oh,
say about them?
Jesus.
Like,
Ugh. He says
I
that they're
definitely.
spheres of mirages, and
oh
that he
gosh,
just like
yeah,
basically like stripped down their entire like belief system in like one fucking
No,
gesture without
he
even
yeah,
said
deeply considering their ties to the elements as natives living with the land.
yeah. No, this whole
They're
book,
so
that's
tied into the elements. It's like I just couldn't
yeah,
believe that.
yeah,
It
yeah.
was
No,
gross.
this whole book is coming from that Western centric point of view of progress. Again, it's this like progress. So Native
Ugh.
Americans all in that viewpoint always represent this like, oh, this quaint like
Primitive.
past
Yeah.
primitive knowledge that we've
No, they're
transcended that
foundational.
now. We've
Foundational.
transcended that. And it's like that's total bullshit. Like that's like
Okay.
yeah.
It bothered me so much. Okay,
Yeah.
here's my other thing
No.
that bothered me hugely. Like the his interaction with bringing the Nazi situation into the conversation. The way he was like the myth of the 21st century, not, like it was almost like at first I was like, is he a Holocaust denier? But I was like, he wasn't. He was like trying to attribute it to like a mirage and like the charisma of like Hitler pulling in people. Um, but I was
Yeah,
like,
he's
no, dude,
big.
he discussed it as it was a war thing instead of a life thing. Like these are lives, these are humans. This is like not this.
Oh
I don't
yeah.
know the way he communicated in a very like removed, more scientific way. That I found slightly inhumane, and I found the same ringing true with when he brings up Eastern cultures or indigenous people. Like he's I was like kind of slack-jawed at first for a second, not because of like the way he produced the idea, not even what he said. I mean, what he said was like, like I get what you're saying. That was you don't bring the Nazis into this unless you're willing to like I don't know, dude. He
I would
he was
say he's
talking.
just making a point on like the evils that come from mirages, right? That's the point. And
Yeah,
like
I
so
know
like
what the point
it
was, but the
should
way it was
sink in as an
displayed.
evil thing. Like that's what's the evil that comes from the mirage. I don't know.
No, but he was talking about how the only way it came to an end was like warfare and like destruction in a sense. Where I was like, I don't think that it takes a process going that far to be called like what it is. You know what I mean? Like I get what he was saying with the
Got it.
hyperbole, but he almost like was dismissive about that too because he wasn't talking about the lives. He was talking about like I don't know. I don't know. There was I can't even describe the way it bothered me. Let me go back to it. I'm gonna find it.
I mean, he's got this like preoccupation. It's still like the preoccupation with like getting us to this like I don't know,
Like he was discussing like
getting us to
worths.
the revelation.
Yeah. What was this gonna bother me now?
I mean,
Yeah. Anyways,
I think it just shows his ignorance in living outside of like his empathy capacities. I mean, really, I don't know. I mean, I hate to even say it like that, but living outside of his own, which I mean, I think a lot of people in this genre that are even still alive today, like I imagine like my grandpa saying something like this, and just being really shitty about it. And like I love my grandpa more than almost anyone, So it's like this, but he comes for like, and it's not excusable, but these ideas are kind of like dying out now. And like you can't say stuff like this and have it be published these days. Like it's just not going to unless you go on a conspiracy site or something. Like it wouldn't have been said this way if it were, which is really, really a bummer that we have to read it and then I have to put big question marks and just skim over it and like get to the good stuff, kind of deal. But
My quandary with that fact is that like everything that we love and that we think is awesome writing now and like really like on it is going to be like 150 years from now that'll be looked at as being ignorant and and limited,
yeah. I mean, ish.
It's
That's
like
kind of why it's hard to do
what we
opinion
think is
pieces.
yeah.
this is a relatively short time period though. And I think that if you were to, I wouldn't talk about things that I don't know about. I know that he likes to bring in all of his, like, he brings in okay, like this book, I was thinking about that while I was reading this chapter. Like he brings in all of the like academic texts, and he has his favorite people that he like references really often, but then
Yes,
he
starring Carl Jung.
in these things that he doesn't know anything about. And he tries to say that he knows everything about it, like he knows these other subjects, and then speaks like shitty about them. Like that's not cool, you know? And like I wouldn't, as an author, or like as like making a point, do that without fully investigating, like from credible and legitimate source material on what, like really immersing myself in that culture before I bring in anything of the Red Indians or the Nazi movement. It's like, dude, no, like,
Well, and I think we're getting into a place of like qualifying our biases, and I think this is really cool. Like in the stories we tell about anything, like anything, because we know that we can only ever have limited knowledge of any subject, right? So you have to kind of qualify your biases as best you can and speak from your own honesty of what your truth, your revelated truth is,
yeah,
especially in spiritual stuff. And that's
Well,
what's,
but he
and
just
we're moving into a place, and this is what I love about like animistic Gordon White stuff is like he's like, take this book as a relationship right now, like relate with this book, like read it, like, and of course Tyson Yonkaporta was, he
yeah,
talked about that, where it's not that this isn't definitive, this is like a moment in time of like ideas putting out there, and like see, notice how you relate with these ideas. Again, it's like we're dancing with ideas more. It's like we're getting moving into this place of like it's not there's not these absolutes, like these absolute truths or ways that you can like achieve things, and it's not, there isn't an and I think, and the thing is this book is getting to some of that, like, and I think we've talked about that, it gets to some of these same truths, because it is saying like that like truth is really, truth with a capital T is really hard to come by. It is saying that very clearly, like discerning truth, like truth from facts, even like, right? Or like truth from, what is it? He says like wisdom from, maybe it's saying wisdom from truth, discerning wisdom from truth. Like they're
oh,
not wisdom
when he
from
was
truth.
talking,
It's like truth and
joy. I mean,
because a mirage is, he's saying a mirage is real, but it's not the truth.
truth.
Yeah, so
well,
like
he
the
said good,
truth from
yeah,
the mirage.
Yeah.
yeah, and then he also brought
And
up
like,
good and beautiful, the
yeah,
differentiation between good and beautiful.
Yeah, true.
yeah. And it's like even science is like, science isn't truth, right? Because it's only, because it's always ever limited. It can't be like, and it's even that's the beauty of science, is it like a proper science knows that it's not it's
It's
approximating,
testing.
it's not, yeah. And it's, there's function, like it's functional, right? It's like, but it's not necessarily telling you the truth, it's just telling you like, of giving you a
Describes,
prediction, right?
yeah, it describes how it can operate, or describes a predict, something.
Hmm.
And it is self-limiting by its own biases, what gets studied and what gets known, and what, and how truth is validated is like its own
Well, that's,
bias,
yeah.
Gordon White talks about that a lot
When
too, so
history is
it's like,
written by the conquerors, for the
yeah,
most part, and he comes from that era of
exactly,
That's what I'm
history
trying to
by the
say with
conquerors.
yeah,
yeah.
His
And like
approach
his,
to
that's
all of
why I
this.
feel like his a dismissive approach to like he talks about like the mirage. Like first he introduces the myth of the Nazi Germany, which I'm like, it wasn't a myth, that was real. Like you can say it was a mirage to a certain extent, but like that was very real for a lot of people. So then he goes into saying that it just dissipated. I was like, no, it didn't just dissipate with military defeat. That's not how that thing, it left like a crater. Like your analysis of the situation is very bad.
Yeah.
Like that's what I was getting so
mhm.
irritated about. And I finally went back and like was like looking at it while we were talking. I was just like, yeah, dude, like that's, I don't,
I know. You
This-
should have sat, dude, you should have sat with this revelation for another 50 years before you published it,
Before
by
you
your
talk
own
about it,
admission.
oh man.
2 years
Oh,
and counting.
Well, I think it's ironic that he brings up revisionism when he's not willing to revise anything. It seems like he's only willing to build on things, which I think is cool because he has a great plethora of knowledge. But at the same time, like his revisionism seems to be biased, like you said, from like the time frame of being like, I'm a white Christian male. He's from what was this was published in the UK, so he's like a UK white male.
I would think that if he were to publish, if he were more alive today and publishing something similar, that he would include a lot of qualifications. Like I'm saying, like it would include more of that, like fluid, like engagement with the text rather than and with the author rather than like this definitive thing. And maybe it wouldn't, because maybe like the Catholic thing would be just too
he
ingrained,
just
but I
he
don't know.
just
I think
demonizes the dance so hard in this. Like he's like, oh, the
yeah.
dance is like the movement and it's good, but at the
But
same
it's
time, like he kind of demonizes the dance in a way where like he's like, there's only one way to dance, and it's in the
yeah.
Christian light, you know? And you're like, oh, okay, like that's
Two
not how
step.
I don't, yeah,
Christians
exactly. Like
Tango.
have no rhythm, like just dance like Carlton, like everyone.
No
Christians
tango.
have
Like,
Christians have a long tradition of restricting the body in various
okay,
ways.
so okay, so by the end of this book, I realized I think the problem I've had with him through the whole book is like he has this baseline of a colonizer. Like
Yeah.
his ideas of Christianity are very colonizing. Like he's like, I planted this flag in your brain and now you're Christian, you know?
Well, and that's
Like, and
what
that's the only way to think. And
that's
that's kind of
what
how I feel like this book rang true with like the Red Indian and like the way he's like talking about people at
Yeah.
the end here as a world
Mhm.
perspective. This is your inclusive idea. Like,
Mhm.
Jesus.
that's
Totally.
All right,
why
like,
I asked what the Eastern Christianity was, because I thought when I read that, I thought he was talking about in Asia, churches that had gone over and like the people, or in Africa, and you get those missionaries and that they have no organized religion because they're in the middle of nowhere. And I was like, that's when, and then so yeah, that's cool that you brought that up, Versati, because I was like, oh, he's a like that's the point where I was like, he's colonizing with using religion, but that wasn't what he was talking about. But still, that's where my mind went. Mission trips.
it's more of like a spiritual colonization in the sense that they're saying that like everyone has to be Christian and it's like a crusade, but like almost like an intellectual crusade. You know what I mean? Like it's where like say you don't subscribe to someone's religion and they constantly keep trying to like get you in to their thing, and like trying to like push their idea
Yeah.
on you in like a way where you're like, I don't know. I mean, I guess that's
Yeah.
why people pay money for a book that like rings true to like their alignment, but at the same
Mhm.
time it's fun to read something that you disagree with because you can find out like where you actually stand on things. So I find value in it, but I was also just like
Yeah.
like how come there's no women writing like hermetic books? Like I haven't seen a lot of women authors when we're like talking about things and a lot of stuff. There's not a lot of women, I would be very interested in reading something with like esoteric female author.
I
I
agree.
have a feeling that Hermeticism is more men are attracted to it, but there's a history to that too.
But I want to know why the female voice is suppressed everywhere, like in every
It's
literary form, like
well, it's the
from the
history of
beginning.
it's the history of female voice
Yeah,
suppression
but I want to know like
up
the
and down the wall.
esoteric, Kabbalic, or like Hermetic experience of women like back then, because I know that they were
Yeah.
like doing stuff
Well,
too.
I mean, Dion Fortune is a good example,
Okay.
I
There was
think.
some Golden Dawn. I showed
There's
you a Dion
various.
book. There were some good examples in the Golden Dawn of it was I kind of pretty equal. I mean, I think there were like pretty equal amounts of men and women in there. It's just I think male voices um probably come from a different perspective at that time, of being a little maybe more boisterous or more like determined into like getting that out than like a lot of women were
Yeah,
for
They were
fear
more legitimized, yeah.
yeah,
for fear. And I think we're going through like ancestral trauma when it comes to like, or how do you say like societal trauma with like
Repressed trauma.
we literally had like
yeah.
the witch huntings or whatever, you were burned at the stake for being a witch. Like it was like 150 years ago, right? I mean,
Wasn't that
200
Yeah,
long ago.
right
and
Yeah,
now.
then women women became women's magic in the West, particularly in Europe, became like this subtle thing of like manipulating men and like being like the inspiration. The recent podcast, this is a good example. The recent podcast with Jason Louv, not the
Oh,
most recent, but the one before it. It's an interview about Aleister Crowley, and
oh,
they talk pretty extensively about how Grace Kelly, who was Crowley's wife, Grace Kelly or Grace Kelly?
that's an actress, but
Yeah, no, Rose. I think her name is Rose Kelly. Rose Kelly was his wife, and she gave him the name of the god that he summoned in the
Thoth.
Thelema. No, in like one of the Iwas in the Book of the Law. Like that was
Oh,
her suggestion. She like initiated. She was like so important in his like transmission of the Book of the Law,
oh my
But
God.
she didn't write things, and like nobody ever interviewed her. And that's they talk
But
about
I
this
would
like
be interested in
it's a
hearing, yeah, about
tragedy that nobody ever interviewed her. That like she wasn't interviewed. Like and that's the times, Crowley, the charismatic, like extremely prolific, extremely intelligent writer who's like does all these things, but like but her role like at the time that's like what women were kind of trained
Supporting.
to do for a long time, and that's why like witchcraft became this like really underground thing, like very hidden, the hidden arts, the hidden magics, that like the ways of manipulating men. And you
Oh,
see that in like I took a women in religion and medieval England class, like totally random, but like that was kind of like the way women in medieval England were like learned to use their power and stuff. You read it in like Chaucer and stuff. Like it's pretty
when they,
they would
Chaucer.
even make themselves like come off like witchy, so then people would fear them cursing them, so they would be like protected by like
Yeah,
fear, like people fearing them if like they're older women, because it's like
yeah,
hard not to get robbed when you're an old woman. Like out in the freaking Middle Ages, like everyone
yeah.
was being shitty.
page
But yeah, they're
635 talks about that, and that went into the apocalyptic witchcraft. Remember when he went in this chapter about the orgy on the mountain, right?
yeah, I kind of enjoyed that part. The way he was like writing and talking about it was hilarious. Like I was like, I can't even believe he brought this up, and like you could tell he was like,
Yeah, yeah,
hedonism, get it away.
yeah.
But I thought it was
Can't
so
even talk
cool
about it too much or it's contagious. It was
in
cute.
contrast.
Then he brought up hippies, which I thought was funny. The long-haired, like ragamuffins or whatever
The
these days.
bearded artist was what he
Yeah,
called him.
bearded.
The beauty.
Like,
Yeah.
But yeah, to read the apocalyptic witchcraft, like beside this book, like that, I
Yeah.
was like, whoa, that chapter. Because I mean, yeah, that's just talking about the Sabbath, right? Or the Sabbath, the witch's Sabbath. Like,
Mhm.
it's like this, and I'm all shit. Like, that's, and that's all female. Like, I think that's where it went. And that's like the counter Black Mirror to this work is like what he talks about in apocalyptic witchcraft, because it's
mm.
very female, like blood.
I'm gonna have to borrow it after you then,
I've
yeah.
been, yeah, I'm totally gonna give it to you because
Yeah, it's a cool book. I'll have to reread it.
it feels like an important read
How
for.
are we how are we gonna decide what book we read next?
I know. Are we done? Do we want to? I want to read that first quote again, but is there any other thing that we missed in this chapter before we wrap it up? I think we got to everything,
Covered it.
right?
We covered it pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, he just he ends
Satisfied.
it with yeah, the form. It just continues. Yeah. I think we're good. Plato, as did St. Thomas Aquinas, arrived at the spiritual poverty which is necessary to become a cup and a scepter, wand, to become a receptacle for the revelation of being, and then to become an active cooperator, which means to say initiated. The worlds are spheres of pentacles, coins, swords, cups, and wands correspond to the degree of traditional way of preparation, purification, illumination, and perfection. So that was basically what we already talked about, but kind of summarizes his whole deal: purification to be in light. to be in purification state, whatever.
Oh man, and I just like again bringing up Plato. It's like so much of it is like this. A lot of this Neoplatonic ideas. Like Plato is like his. I think Plato is his like ultimate hero.
It's
Besides,
pretty obvious, yeah. Besides
yeah,
Young.
yeah, and it's like his tradition comes from this like, yeah. I mean, it's the Christian tradition. So much of the Christian tradition as it was passed on.
But I'm going to read that quote again because it's
What
just
is that?
a good one. We need to
That's
end it on a
awesome.
good note. The first impression of this card is therefore as if the last major arcanum of the tarot would suggest a conception of the world as rhythmic movement or dance of the female psyche, sustained by means of the orchestral accompaniment of the four primordial instincts, which give the appearance of a rainbow of colors and forms, or in other words, that the world is a work of art.
And I love the quote, one truly lives only when one dances.
Yeah.
Yay. Thus
Let us dance.
Meditations on the Tarot. Longest book
Throw it back.
college.
We did it. We did it.
We did.
Yeah.
Oh man, that was some heavy lifting, you guys. I'm
Yeah.
surprised. That was a year in the making.
So now is
That was
suggestion
quite a
time.
book.
Should I record this process or should I not record this process?
I don't have any suggestions as of now. I don't know if you guys want to wait till like more people come, or because I wasn't sure if we were gonna bring suggestions or if we were like if George was gonna bring
Last time we
suggestions. I
talked
don't
that
know.
it was going
I
to be
didn't know.
last time we said we're going to decide this time, right?
Okay, okay. Well, yeah, I didn't really have much suggestions in the way of a book that would go well after this, and so yeah, I was gonna.
I'd like to hear your suggestions that you brought, Haley.
I know, because I actually I just did a Scarlet Scarlet Press, or what is it?
Scarlet Imprint. Oh yeah.
Scarlet Imprint U-Haul. So I have like 3 books that I got from them. But my friend this weekend recommended Tantric Quest, which is an encounter with absolute love, it says. It's basically, I gave him the book In Love with the World. And I described it as a hero's journey, kind of storyline of a Tibetan monk through the death process and through going through the bardos. Like I was just kind of describing the books and saying how it would relate to him. And he was like, well, you should check out this book because it's basically like a hero's journey type story through tantric practices and just like falling in love with like this shamanic tantric practitioner woman that like it, and just like, I mean, it might get really, really sexual. Like I think the book is kind of like a sex book, honestly. But not like how to do sex, but like more like they're just having sex all the time and then like figure out a whole bunch about life, because she's like literally a tantric shaman, but I think it'd be cool it's written by a man, but it's a female shaman. So that's kind of cool. And it's an easy read. So there's that. And then I bought Animistic, Gordon White's. So I know you have that. Cody, have you read it all?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a great book. I loved it.
Okay. And then I got Black Abbot, White Magic by Frater Acker, which we already read one, so I don't know.
I'm reading Holy Heretics now.
Which is the 3rd one, right?
Yeah. It's great. The practices in it are like some of my favorite practices that I've found. It's like it's inspired. Frater Acker is like right now he's on something. Like his stuff. I got Ingenium.
Ooh.
This it's really good. It's really
Is that by
really,
him?
really, yeah. He basically published this and
Holy Damon?
Holy Heretics within like a month of each other.
I'm down for either one of those.
Last one too, Jake Stratton Kent.
Oh yeah.
He just died. So
Yeah.
I mean, it might be really cool in terms of if anyone's actually watching this, you know, to read something pretty relevant. I just don't
Like a
know.
homage.
It's and a homage because he was a necromancer, so like it's going to be very very heavy on the like demonology stuff, and I do think that this book is more of a like there's a lot of pictures and it's more of a how to do goetic work type of book.
Yeah.
So like the whole
Okay.
back of this is sigils.
Oh, yeah.
um
That that seems really interesting to me, and I want to read it. But I'm not. I'm actually kind of hesitant to do anything that has much practice in it, because we've done a
Yeah,
lot of
book
that,
club
and it,
stuff.
to me that does not that valuable for a book club because it's so
Hmm.
personal work. And it can be fun to kind of talk about doing the practices, but we're already in our own practices. Like we're doing our, so like I like the theory to augment practice. So like something more theoretical is definitely my.
I
Well, you
agree.
know how we're like moving from like planetary, or I mean from elemental to like planetary, it kind of feels like since we ended on like the world card to have something that like expands on the world, you know, and like our interactions or perceptions or like dance with the world would be cool, like a way of like, you know, segueing ideas and like kind of continuing where the last book left off. I don't know if there's any of those fit into the practum of what we're trying to do.
I don't know, and we're
Well,
not we need I mean we still have another 3 or 4 months probably before we're getting into and the pace that we're going before we get into planetary stuff, right? So I mean we might also like finish a book before we even like get to planetary stuff at this point, which I mean we
Oh,
need
I
to,
know, no,
but
no, I just meant like not like actually reading something planetary, but I was saying like the analogy of just like moving to like the broader scope of like the same information in the sense of like if like one of those books is like something that like helps us like engage with like the movement and like dance and rhythm of like the world and like the way we're like moving through it.
hmm.
If any of those books strike a chord in like that way.
I mean, I like Ingenium for some of that.
Okay.
It's he it's pretty so far. I read like the first, not quite, I think just the first chapter. Um, and he's talks in the first chapter is about engaging with spirits on their own terms rather than um the kind of the goet it's he's talking he basically is criticizing like classical goetic work, like as being like, I'm just gonna create this circle and call the demons
Triangle, yeah.
down, where like he's like telling you to go out, like if you want to know like the spirit of the king of the north, like the demon king of the north, like go out when it's blustery wind with the north wind and send your consciousness up and feel the north wind and relate with it, like dance with it if you will, you know. So that's why I'm saying like that does remind me of like, yeah, like learning to dance with the world,
Mhm.
dance with spirits. He doesn't use the word dance, um, but like engage with it on its own, engage with these spirits on their own terms, and
Mhm.
then you can maybe learn their names and stuff. But just calling these demons out of like these books, like, and the books, he says the books can be helpful and they work in a lot of ways, but they're like, but it's kind of a skewed colonial. He's like even decolonializing a lot of it. He talks about that, like it's a colonial mentality of like conquering nature, dominating it rather than and like going at it as if it's like some mysterious, like scary thing, you know,
Mhm.
um, rather than like engaging with it on its own terms. And like, yeah, I think that's what I'm really liking about like people like Frater Rocker lately. But
I mean, Frauder Rocker's like my favorite, you know. I mean, other than what I forget, actually, never mind. But yeah, I agree.
and
Works.
Gordon White, I think Gordon White is coming from a similar thing. Gordon White's just more coming from like a chaos magic kind of shamanic place, and whereas Frater Rocker's
I kind of
very
like that
much like
idea too,
Western
though.
esoteric tradition.
Does Frauder Rocker focus on, is it mostly, I mean, which I'm good with, but I'm not sure. Is it mostly like demon work? Like, is he working mostly with what's the book about? Like, because I mean, I know you read a bit about it, but
Well, so far it's that stuff, but he gets into like this Paracelsian magic. Um,
Hmm.
I don't know. It's an interesting book. It's like I don't know if I can even describe it. Seeing the light of nature, celestial inclinations. These are like um, foundation of animistic spirit practice. Um, magic is walking on a tightrope, clearing the glass of our soul. It's like he's very much like walking the narrow path.
Hmm.
This and that's where his like magical tradition is, and this is where Holy Heretics is like guiding is like really good at guiding because it's like embracing the expansive, like the like luminous emptiness and whatnot, but also the chthonic, like like walking the razor's edge between the chthonic and the celestial. That's a big. I feel like that's the big thread in his work.
Okay.
So like there's like practices of like Jesus chants in Holy Heretics, basically like where you're like invoking the soul of Christ into your heart kind of thing, you know, which is like, but then of course then he'll like go into some like goetic stuff, you know,
I'm
to
down
like
for
balance it. But
always.
you know, I've nominated
Wait,
every.
what about
I just
Justin
like
White?
I just wanted to talk about this book a little bit, but
Gordon
I've
White.
nominated a lot of books, so I
Gordon
don't
White,
feel like
yeah.
Cody
What
just finished
you,
this book though, so I mean, it would be
I would
like
reread it.
you
or
would.
is there any other books? Because like I kind of like the idea of like the more like Eastern shamanism style instead of like the because we I just feel like we've been reading this like really heavy Western hermetic
Yeah.
book that it would be cool to like switch up gears for a sec because I think that if we read another Western book it'll like really like be like a slow read or like feel like a slow read for me.
His
I
work's
would
not gonna feel like that, but either one of these aren't gonna. And Gordon's pretty Western as well. He just comes from it from a chaos magic perspective, so it's gonna feel less organized. The last book we read's not a
and
good. It's not gonna be like any of the others. It's not like any of the other stuff we've read, honestly. Continue.
and animistic. He goes into like more Australian, New Zealand, and he's like a he's has a good knowledge of anthropology and stuff. So he has like and cultural practices,
Yeah, I like
and
that kind of
and he
stuff.
acknowledges that he's very limited in his understanding, but he's always like qualifies everything with a something like it's something like this practice. He'll talk about like some and he talks about the problems of talking about other people's cultures and stuff, but whatever. But that's cool. But I think something like African magic or something would be
I know
cool,
would be
Oh,
awesome.
I'm super down. I'm super
or
down.
like or like
Well,
Santa Muerte stuff from Mexico, something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I've
Like
been
I
reading
don't
a lot
know.
about that
There's some good.
with my
Yeah.
shaman books that I've been reading. Like the Joan Halifax one is just like a survey of shamanism from across the globe. And it's just like stories straight from the shaman about like their experience, which is cool, but it's like it's more of like a very quick read. And it's interesting to talk about like the allegories and like the presence of like their spirits and stuff. I think it would be fun to like read something like you're talking about, something like a culture that we haven't really explored, but we like have like a draw towards, or like I don't know. I think it'd be fun to read something completely out there.
we got to find it. It's the whole thing because
Yeah.
it's kind of like,
Yeah.
I mean, I agree, but it's kind of hard to it's hard to come by those books in like. I mean, I don't know. We need to let's do some like
There
solid research and let's read something that's not going to take. I mean, this is the longest book. I don't even think we should pick up a book that's that long probably again. Just or maybe we will. I don't know. I'm not going to say anything like
I
that,
mean,
but
not right now. Yeah, no, I agree.
yeah.
I definitely want to read something that's not going to take forever, you know, because it's just that's not how I want to do it. For Gordon White's book, it says it's 210 pages. There's only 7 chapters. So, I mean, theoretically, we could get that done in 3 months if we want.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to do.
If we do like 2, you know, even if we do just a chapter per week. I mean, that's 7 chapters. So 7, you know, 7 times 2, 14. I don't know. 3 months, 4 months. Um,
There are some similarities between that book and Tyson Yom Kippur. There's like some pretty fun. They're very different books. I mean they talk about like kind of different things, but they kind of come to the same very similar conclusions. I mean he quotes Tyson Yom Kippur like pretty extensively in this book even.
Which, I mean, what were our critiques of Tyson's book? Because there were quite a few, and I think it was his.
There's
It was
almost militancy or
it
something.
was like a militancy, and like it wasn't
Yeah.
really a magic book, like per se. It was more like a cultural book. Um,
This is more of a magic.
more of a magic book. Okay,
He even says it straight up.
yeah.
Without it doesn't have practices. Doesn't have like practical.
I mean, I feel weird because you've already read it. Is kind of the whole thing that I come from. I
Yeah.
prefer Frater Acker's writing over Gordon White's. Even though I love the Chaos Protocols, but I wouldn't necessarily read the Chaos Protocols again. I'd rather give it to somebody versus Frater Acker. Like I'm never giving that book away because it's just like that's something that's like very, So I think quality wise, I mean, not that sounds really messed up to say, but like,
No, it's
um,
a good time to be honest because we're gonna, want to do something that's like fulfilling. Cody, do you have any books that are like what you're talking about with like the African or like Mesoamerican style?
I don't.
are we not down for Tantric Quest, right? Take that off the take that off the list.
I mean, I would be interested in looking more into that, but like sometimes like when tantra is like a lot of sex, I'm skeptical of it.
Hmm.
But that might be just a bias that I kind of got from my schooling
Yeah,
about tantra because tantra like being equated with sexual stuff is like such a small like very small surfacey thing of tantra and
But
of
it's also like the
yoga in the
opposite of what
West. But
people
that
think
book
because
might
Tantra is like the friction of abstaining that creates the energy in which like you choose to when you turn on and off the faucet in the sense of like energy flow. But yeah, I think it's like a lot different than people think it is because I've read a lot about tantric stuff. But yeah, I don't know if like I mean yeah I don't know if yeah I think the Fraud Rocker sounds more.
what were you gonna say, Cody, though, about this book? Did you
about,
have another comment?
well no just about tantra in general. But I mean tantra is a huge a Hindu tantra like Indian tantra stuff is like wait it's a huge field. I mean there's so much
I'll have to
so
like
many
read a bit
different
of
kinds
it
of
and
texts
because
and
maybe I
practices.
just overgeneralize. I mean, I do really, yeah, I trust my friend's judgment, but I don't know enough about it. So
Yeah, I mean I don't know. Yeah, I don't know about it. So I just had an immediate reaction. That's
for
all I
sure. No,
was.
valid. I didn't think
Yeah.
that. I also described it as that. So, and so that's also like, yeah, take my.
Right. Right. It might not have that much sex in it. And the sex might be really cool. It might be really interesting sex magic stuff. That
Yeah.
would be interesting. But
Brother Arker then? I
which
wish, I mean,
one?
I'd love to read something by Jake Stratton Kent just because he, passed and I think that'd be cool, but I was just trying to do a quick Google search.
Is
Um,
there is there other stuff by him that's more like theoretical?
I
I
know.
wonder.
That's what I was trying to look
Because
up.
because Frauder that's the thing about like white the thing about I think the Holy Daimon cycle is it has a lot of practice stuff. It's like very much practical. I mean,
Mhm.
his theory, the theory stuff is really cool. I like how he has like really solid theory to back up the practice.
Mhm.
But this book, Ingenium, doesn't really have. It has like practical notes, but it doesn't have like ritual instruction with it.
Okay, that's good.
It's
Or,
it's
for what we
mostly
want.
theory. Yeah.
I can't even find like a list of books that he's written. I'm gonna try to just look it up on Good Books.
And it has some great like this book has some really great like graphic
Ooh.
graphical representations and stuff.
Yeah, let's do the Frater Rocker one then.
It's It's a really pretty book. Like pictures.
Uh,
And if you order from Scarlet Imprint, you might get this really sexy bookmark.
I have so many. Get all my bookmarks.
Yeah. Oh, you have like other ones
I
too.
got
They
another
have
one. I know
some.
because I got 3 books,
Oh,
so it came with
I
3 of
only
them. But 2 of
they
them were
gave
this
me.
one.
Oh yeah, I got 2 of these.
Yeah.
They do have sexy books for sure.
I know they're just so pretty.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
this one, Ingenium isn't Scarlet Imprint though,
okay.
actually.
Well, it means
It's
we'll probably get there sooner.
it's Todd Hint, which is McCarthy's publishing.
Oh,
Josephine McCarthy.
Josephine McCarthy? Cool.
Yeah. She would be an interesting one to read.
Yeah.
I don't like her writing very much though. She's so like she rambles way too much.
What did we read? What did we read of her? What was that?
I don't think we have.
We haven't.
Yeah. She's like I get this like feeling that she's really full of herself and it's like it's kind of annoying.
Hmm. Oh, okay. Yep. Well, what have I think I might have something of hers even. Oh, Claudia. Yep. Okay. Here we
Yeah,
are.
she's the quarter. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. She's
Interesting.
great. She has some like really
I
cool stuff
didn't
and
love her
some great
interviews.
like ritual.
Yeah, I didn't love
What's
her
that?
interviews. I agree with you. I didn't
Yeah.
really love
Yeah.
her interview style.
Yeah.
Um,
She's very kind of know-it-all-y and like this is how it has to be, this very like has to be like this. If you
I
don't like
I did
it,
learn a lot from her though about portal and stuff, which I would love to read about more about like labyrinths and portals. Like she did this
oh,
interview of that was like her trip to Spain where she learned all of these labyrinths
oh
and
cool.
she had a bunch to say about it.
Oh wow.
Which I don't know if
Yeah,
that's in any of these books, but
I mean she's great. I think she is a really solid magician in this world.
mhm.
Like she knows a lot. She
Which
also has a lot of kind of superstition and stuff that like that I think that's cool, but it's not.
she started talking about
I
what
don't
the medical system, and that's when it was like,
oh
that's when it was very clear it was a right way and a wrong way to do things, you know?
yeah.
It got very like that. So I think that's when I agree. I first started thinking that maybe it was a little bit too narrow path type of view.
Yeah. She's almost like puritanical or something in her like style of witchcraft.
That's
Maybe.
what, yeah, that's kind of the style that I don't want to read next if we can avoid it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. Frauderacher or Gordon White. Cody, what's your
Man, I wish George were here to vote too, but
I think we should go with Fraud Rocker because you haven't read it yet, and then we can always go to a Gordon White later because it's only like 2 months. It's not even long. We can bang through this one pretty quick and like
how how long's the Frauderacher book? Because
Ingenium,
Gordon White's only 2 months, but how long is the
it is 264 pages.
how many chapters?
Oh, five long
Okay.
chapters.
5 long chapters. I mean, we could do one chapter every 2 weeks, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. I mean, I'm the slowest reader of everyone in book club, so but I'll do
well, I
it.
think what we can do is to like reassess if it's taking us longer, then we can do the 2 weeks. But if we can do it in 1 week, I mean, it depends. If you said they're long, so 2 weeks sounds better, more
So we're
realistic.
always gonna do 2 weeks. Like we're
Okay.
for sure, it's always every other week for Wednesdays. Right? I mean, we're not gonna change that. I don't think we should change
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
No.
that's great.
No, book club's every other Wednesday. But I mean, I just mean, should we break up the chapters but no, we could do a chapter a week, even if
I think so. Yeah.
or chapter every 2 weeks. I mean, chapter every time we meet.
The first chapter is 50.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
May you send me a link to either with the name or where you got it, whatnot, and I can do the
Do you
rest.
want us to just send it in the chat box?
You could do that, yeah. And then I'll stop recording. So bye everyone watching. Frater Ockers, wait, what book is it? Just so they know.
Oh man, now I feel bad. I feel like I've nominated every book, and
But that's great. You have the best
ends up-
suggestions.
Yeah.
You do. You suggest the best books, and you read like a madman. So it's
yeah.
perfect. You're perfect, and it's you're co-hosting. You're technically the my dual host. So I do all this stuff, and you do the recommending.
Yeah, that's a great contribution.
I bought it on Amazon because
Perfect.
I
What's the
rarely
book called,
buy
though?
things on.
Just say the title so that the people that are listening know what it is.
Here, I'll send a link. It's Ingenium or Ingenium.
Ingenium Green.
And the subtitle is Alchemy of the Magical Mind.
Ooh, Alchemy of the Magical Mind.
Yeah. There's just the Amazon link.
Perfect. By Frater Ocker. Our fave, BFF. I follow him on Facebook. He's excellent. Yeah, Ingenium, the alchemy of the magical mind. Ingenium. That sounds awesome. Okay, stopping recording.